6:22 a.m. Strait of Hormuz, northern transit lane. Two Iranian Noor anti-ship missiles just lifted off from a coastal battery on the Iranian shore and were tracking directly toward USS Bulkeley and USS Roosevelt, both destroyers transiting the strait in standard formation. The missiles were sea-skimming. Altitude 6 meters above the water. Speed Mach 0.9. Time to impact 51 seconds. What they did in those 51 seconds, and what the United States government did in the 72 hours that followed, represents the most significant escalation in the Gulf since the tanker war of the 1980s, and the most deliberate decision to cross a threshold that both sides had maintained for nearly 4 decades. Welcome to Navy Poverline, where we break down the engagements that change the rules, and the decisions that follow them that determine whether those rules ever come back. The Noor missile is not a weapon that leaves ambiguity. When a Noor launches, it launches with intent. It is not a warning shot system. It is not a demonstrative tool. It is a 165-kilogram warhead traveling at 1,100 kilometers per hour at 6 meters above the surface of the water on a radar-guided terminal seeker, specifically designed to impact the hull of a surface combatant at the waterline. When a Noor is in the air, someone has made a decision to kill. That decision had been made at 6:22 a.m. from a hardened coastal battery on the eastern shore of the Strait of Hormuz. To understand what led to that decision, you need to understand what had happened in the preceding 18 hours. The previous morning, U.S. Special Operations Command had conducted a maritime interdiction operation in the Gulf of Oman, a boarding of a stateless vessel suspected of carrying Iranian-origin weapons components destined for a Houthi-aligned network in Yemen. The operation had been authorized under existing maritime security frameworks and had proceeded without incident from a U.S. perspective. The vessel was boarded, the cargo was examined, weapons components were found and seized, and the vessel was released with its crew. From Iran's perspective, the operation was an interception of an Iranian-linked logistics chain, conducted in waters that Iran considers within its sphere of maritime influence, that had resulted in the seizure of material Iran considered its own. The seizure was described by Iranian state media as an act of piracy within 6 hours of its completion. 18 hours after the interdiction, 2 Noor missiles were airborne over the Strait of Hormuz. The connection between the two events was assessed at high confidence by the intelligence community within hours of the engagement. This was not a spontaneous reaction. The coastal battery had been at elevated readiness since the interdiction operation had been confirmed. The targeting solution for vessels transiting the northern lane of the strait had been pre-computed. The decision to fire had been made at a senior level of the IRGCN chain of command, a level that required the authorization of the IRGCN commander and, in the assessment of the intelligence community, the awareness, if not the explicit authorization of the Supreme Leader's office. Iran had decided to fire anti-ship missiles at U.S. warships. That decision had not been made lightly. It had been made deliberately, with full knowledge of the consequences. USS Bulkeley's ESM suite detected the fire control radar lock at 06:21 and 34 seconds, 26 seconds before launch. The ESM operator's report reached the bridge in 8 seconds. The commanding officer ordered immediate defensive posture and CIWS activation at 06:21 and 50 seconds. The missiles launched at 6:22 and 0 seconds. The SM-2 Block 3B standard missile fire control solution was complete within 4 seconds of launch detection on Bulkeley's SPY-1D radar. The SM-2's engagement envelope against a sea-skimming Mach 0.9 target in the strait geometry was within parameters, tight, but within parameters. The strait's narrow width created a compressed engagement timeline, but the short range to the battery, approximately 19 nautical miles, meant the missiles had not yet reached their maximum speed when the engagement solution was generated. 2 SM-2s launched from Bulkeley's forward VLS cells at 6:22 and 11 seconds. 11 seconds after the Noor missiles had left the Iranian battery. The intercept geometry was tight. The Noor's sea-skimming profile, 6 meters altitude, put it below the optimal engagement angle for an SM-2 closing from ahead. The SM-2's active seeker had to maintain a downward-looking angle against a target that was effectively using the water surface as a radar clutter background. The first SM-2 intercepted the first Noor at 6:22 and 39 seconds, 13 miles from Bulkeley's position. The detonation was clean. The Noor's warhead fragmented without full detonation of the main charge. The debris field impacted the water at high velocity. The second Noor was 4 seconds behind the first. USS Roosevelt, operating 3,100 meters ahead of Bulkeley in the transit formation, had also generated an SM-2 firing solution within 6 seconds of launch detection. Roosevelt's shot crossed Bulkeley's intercept geometry by 900 meters and acquired the second Noor independently. Roosevelt's SM-2 intercepted the second Noor at 6:22 and 47 seconds, 9.4 miles from Bulkeley. Both missiles destroyed. Total elapsed time from Iranian launch to second intercept, 47 seconds. No U.S. ship was hit. No U.S. sailors were killed. But the engagement was not over. Not in any sense that the next 60 hours would allow anyone to pretend it was. The Iranian coastal battery had fired. The United States had intercepted. Under the law of armed conflict and the U.S. Navy's standing rules of engagement, the act of firing anti-ship missiles at U.S. warships constituted an act of war. The commanding officers of both Bulkeley and Roosevelt had authority to return fire in self-defense. The battery's position was known. It had been emitting fire control radar for 26 seconds and had been geographically fixed by the SM-2's targeting solution. Harpoon missiles aboard both destroyers had targeting solutions computed before the Iranian missiles had finished their flight. The battery was 19 nautical miles away. It was in range. It was identified. It was hostile. Neither CO fired, not because they lacked authority, not because they lacked targeting data. They did not fire because in the 47 seconds of the engagement, neither had received the order to return fire. And the act of striking a fixed military installation on Iranian soil was a decision of a magnitude that both COS judged required explicit higher authority, regardless of the legal basis for self-defense action. The after-action review of that judgment would take weeks and produce no clear consensus. The request for authority to strike the battery reached 5th Fleet at 6:24 a.m. It reached CENTCOM at 6:26. It was on the National Security Advisor's desk at 6:31. The NSC convened a restricted emergency session at 6:47. The question before the principals was not whether the United States had the legal authority to strike the battery. It did. The question was whether striking a fixed Iranian military installation on Iranian soil, the first such strike in the modern era, would close or open the next chapter of the confrontation. The deliberation took 83 minutes. During those 83 minutes, the two destroyers completed their transit of the strait under continuous F/A-18 combat air patrol cover that had been launched from the carrier strike group 140 nautical miles to the south within minutes of the engagement. The battery site was under continuous ISR coverage. No additional radar emissions were detected from the battery. It had not gone active again. Whether its crew was reloading, standing down, or waiting for orders could not be determined. At 8:10 a.m., the NSC authorized a retaliatory strike. The strike was narrow and precisely defined. The coastal missile battery that had fired, its associated radar infrastructure, and the ammunition storage facility that satellite imagery had confirmed was co-located with the battery 400 meters inland. No other targets. No broader campaign. A single, surgical, proportionate response to a single act of war. Two FA-18Es from the carrier air wing were already on a holding track 80 nautical miles south of the target when the authorization arrived. They had been armed and positioned before the NSC deliberation ended, a preparatory action that the strike group commander had taken on his own initiative while the principals debated in Washington. He had not fired without authority, but he had been ready to fire the moment authority arrived. The aircraft were on their attack run at 8:17 a.m. 4 JDAM-guided 1,000-pound bombs struck the battery site, its radar infrastructure, and the co-located ammunition storage facility in a 34-second strike window. The ammunition storage produced a secondary explosion that was visible on satellite imagery and was described by the P-8 crew on Overwatch as the largest single explosion they had observed in the Gulf region in their combined service careers. The battery was gone. The total time from Iranian missile launch to U.S. retaliatory strike on Iranian soil, 2 hours and 9 minutes. The diplomatic and political consequences that followed were swift, complex, and in several dimensions, unprecedented in the modern era of U.S.-Iran confrontation. Iran's official response, delivered through state media 2 hours after the strike, declared that the United States had committed an act of war against the Islamic Republic, and that Iran reserved the right to respond at the time and place of its choosing. The language was identical to phrasing the U.S. itself had used after the helicopter missile incident months earlier. The symmetry was not accidental. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session within 6 hours. Russia and China co-sponsored an emergency resolution condemning the U.S. strike as disproportionate and aggressive. The United States and United Kingdom vetoed. The session ended without resolution. At the strategic level, the 83-minute deliberation and the precision of the authorized strike produced an outcome that the intelligence community and the NSC had calculated but could not guarantee. Iran did not immediately escalate further. No additional missile launches occurred in the 72 hours following the strike. IRGC surface and air activity increased significantly. Elevated patrols, helicopter activity, fast boat deployments, but no additional weapons were fired. The calculation, as assessed by the intelligence community, was that Iran had tested a threshold with the missile launch and had received a precise, calibrated, limited response. A broader Iranian escalation, additional missile attacks, mine-laying, tanker seizures, would produce a broader U.S. response that Iran's military could not absorb without significant damage to its naval infrastructure. Iran chose not to escalate further. For that week, the coastal battery site was a crater when the next satellite pass came over it. But Iran has more than one coastal battery. The Noor missile system is deployed across multiple hardened sites on both shores of the strait. The strike had removed one installation. The broader architecture of Iranian coastal missile capability was intact. Every subsequent U.S. destroyer transit of the Strait of Hormuz carried the awareness of that architecture in every ESM operator's watch brief, in every SM-2 targeting solution that was pre-computed before entering the transit lane, in every commanding officer's quiet calculation of what 47 seconds looks like when the missiles are not a drill. The crew of USS Bulkeley and USS Roosevelt had intercepted 2 anti-ship missiles in international waters, exercised professional restraint in not retaliating without authority, and continued their transit. Their commanding officers had requested authority for a response that arrived 2 hours and 9 minutes after the shots that nearly killed them. The battery site was rubble. The strait was still 21 miles wide. The next transit was already on the calendar, and somewhere on the Iranian shore, in a hardened facility that the last satellite pass had not yet imaged, another crew was reading the tactical analysis of what had happened to the battery that fired and what it had looked like from the other side of those 47 seconds. They were taking notes. Stay vigilant, stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.